The Holy Gospel selected for this meeting the neighbor Sunday is found in Luke chapter 14. You may remain seated for its reading. Jesus turned to his host. When you put on a luncheon or a banquet, he said, don't invite your friends, brothers and relatives, or rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. Instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting them, those who could not repay you. Hearing this, a man sitting at the table with Jesus exclaimed, what a blessing it would be to attend a banquet in the kingdom of God. Jesus replied with this story. A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. When the banquet was ready, he sent his servants to tell the guests, come, the banquet is ready. But they all began making excuses. One said, I have just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me. Another said, I have just bought 5 pairs of oxen and I want to try them out. Please excuse me. Another said, I just got married, so I can't come. The servant returned and told his master what they had said. The master was furious and said, go quickly into the streets and alleys of the town. Invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and the lame. And after the servant had done this, he reported, there is still room for more. So his master said, go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone that you find to come, so that the house will be full. For none of those I first invited will get even the smallest taste of my banquet. The Gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Invite my children friends to come up for a children's message. Come on up, kids. Well, it was all his idea. It really didn't make common sense, but if that's what he wants, so be it. Those on the original guest list had been prepared and told that the party was going to be coming, but other things got in the way. Other priorities popped up. We understand how that is. And so they politely turned down the invitation to the party, giving those excuses. But that wouldn't stop the party. The host was very clear about it to his servants. You go out in the streets and you bring in people that may never be invited to a party like this before to make sure that they know that I want them there. And when they found out that that didn't even fill up the banquet hall, the servants were sent out another time. He says, now don't just go in the city. Go outside the city. Go out into the parts of that country where people live because they were shunned in the town. The people that maybe have committed a crime and they could never be forgiven. The people that were shunned for the religious community because maybe they made a mistake and they were told that they couldn't be a part of the community anymore. The host says, you go out there and you tell them, I want you to come to my banquet. In fact, when the host told the servants to go out into the country, he said, I want you to urge anyone they meet to come. The word urge means don't take no for an answer. When people say, no, I don't think I'm good worthy, he says, no, this host wants you there. I remember when I was home on the farm and my dad had a very gregarious way to him and a very gracious manner to him. And I still remember sitting around that laminated table with the aluminum wings underneath. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And when Dad would be sitting by some of our guests when he was there and making sure that they had plenty to eat, he would say, do you want some more potatoes? Sure you do. Boom, right on it. And a little on the assertive side, I don't know where I got that from, but anyway, my dad had that hospitality that says, I can't take no for an answer. This gift is for you, and I don't want you to stay away. Can you imagine what the aroma in that banquet hall must have been like? People that had not showered or bathed for weeks, some of them because they didn't have any opportunity, and maybe some because of mental illness and other concerns, they just didn't care. But that didn't stop the master. It was his idea to bring them in. Could you imagine the conversations and the vocabulary that you heard at that banquet feast? I could imagine some words flying around there that the banquet host probably hadn't heard for a long time. Street language, people who have been nurtured with language that we aren't accustomed to in a Lutheran church. But that didn't seem to bother the host. I want them there. It was his invitation. You see, the parable of the great feast changes so many things, folks, but it changes certainly, first of all, our understanding of who we see our God to be in Jesus. The Old Testament way of understanding God was having the term holy connected to God. Holy means separate from, or different from, or separated from other people. Now, that sense of holiness meant that when the people of Israel found themselves to be the holy people, they would also separate themselves from other people that they would call to be the unclean ones. And so that sense of holiness carried over into their community life where there were the ins and the outs. But friends, do you see that this parable changes everything? Jesus invites the people of his day to say that God is doing something new. And no longer is this God going to be distant from people, but he's going to invite them into the banquet. And this God's idea is to bring them in no matter how they might find themselves on the street or even in that part of town or in the country where they've been shunned by so many others. You see, in Jesus, we see God going on the search of people who feel left out. People who know that they're bankrupt. They know that they don't have anything to offer a person that would be rich enough to offer a banquet feast. And so they would eliminate themselves as a possibility. And along comes Jesus and says, "This is for you." Friends, this is the story of grace as its finest moment. Grace, attendance at a banquet based not on a person's worthiness, totally upon the wish of the giver of that banquet that says, "I want you there." Friends, it's the love of Jesus that changes everything for us. The love of Jesus that embraces the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the sinners, the liars, and those who can't get out from underneath that big rock that seems to be falling on top of them. Jesus says, "I come to invite you to be a part of the kingdom. You are the invited guest because I want you there." I remember my early years of ministry, being a pastor in Litchfield and then in Faribault, and then in Shepherd of the Hills of Edina for some years. And I remember teaching in confirmation and even in worship, telling people that if you want to come to communion, there's some preconditions. You have to be baptized, and you have to understand that Jesus and God is really present in these elements. When I think back of what I was saying to the people, no, you don't come as you are. You have to understand some things and you have to do things right. Friends, did I not read chapter 14 of Luke? Did my Bible cut out that parable of the banquet that says no? Jesus says no preconditions. You don't have to qualify. You don't have to meet my standards. I want you there. I shudder the way in which that grace has covered my mistakes as a pastor, because I see clearly now that Holy Communion is a gift that comes to all of us, and none of us are held at God's arm's length for any other reason other than that he says, "I want you to come and be there." It is totally Jesus and his invitation that makes it possible for us to eat together. My son Ryan gets that story. My son Ryan, who is a person that lives with Down syndrome, understands this grace. He knows what it means to be invited to the table, and when he's worshiping at United Lutheran in Red Wing, and I'm with him, I better have my seatbelt on, because when it comes for communion, he jumps out of that front pew and he's first in line. He says, "This invitation is for me, and I'm not going to let it pass by." But it was before that I understood what communion had to say to me through Ryan. Before he went to a group home, he was one of those kids that was always in church and loved being there, kind of a strange one that way. But when he came home from church almost every Sunday possible, he would be putting up all of his stuffed animals either on his bed across against the wall or else sometimes on the floor against the wall, and he would do church. That's the downside of being a pastor's kid, I suppose. You carry over what you see your dad doing. And I never thought about it before, but what's the difference between church, the stuffed animals on the bed, and down below? Maybe it was high church and low church. I don't know. But anyway, when I would watch Ryan from the doorway without him knowing it, I could recognize the invocation almost clearly. I noticed that he switched to the sermon quickly, and that sermon was so short, and all of his stuffed animals were smiling because that's much better than what his dad did in church that morning. And then he turned to Holy Communion. Folks, I can't tell you what that memory does to me at this moment. Because Ryan would go to every single one of his stuffed animals. It didn't make any difference if they were brand new with a tag on or if they had been worn so hard that seams are pulling apart or buttons are missing, and even some of them had magic marker written all over. They all were in line, and Ryan would say, "Body of Christ for you, body of Christ for you, body of Christ for you," and he wouldn't miss a single one of his animals. For Ryan, it didn't make any difference the condition of that stuffed animal. It didn't make any difference the value of them. It didn't make any difference how broken they were. Jesus' gift was for you. Friends, Ryan helped teach me something I didn't learn in seminary. That the great banquet feast means that everyone comes with our brokenness, no matter where we are, and Jesus wants us there because that's his idea. We can't hear this parable of the great banquet without asking some questions about who our neighbor might be, and Jennifer already alluded to that. Because at this banquet feast that we were invited to, we will find people there that have disabilities and people who have been called outsiders. People that we know that were shunned to the outside now are invited in. Now what do we do? People are going to be sitting across the banquet table from us, people who we've only been given labels to in the past because, to be frank about it, we've oftentimes avoided them on the street, but now they have a name. I am so proud to be a pastor of a church like our Saviour's Lutheran. A church that is bold enough to say that we want to invite everybody into our worshiping community and into our community life. And if there's ways in which we can serve you and you can serve us, we want you here. To know that we have a group called Welcoming All Neighbors. It was initially called the Refugee Committee, but we quickly found out that the need of the outsider is more than just refugees. It's people that live in our communities that don't have a home. People who don't know what it is to be accepted. And this group of people get together and they brainstorm together saying, and they pray together, how can we enhance our congregational ministry of welcoming and reaching out to the outsider, inviting them in? And friends, if you feel your heart tugged in that direction, I beg you to let your name be known to somebody in the front desk so that you can be a part of this planning team, because this team is helping us carry out Luke 14 so well. So where are you in the story? Are you like me sometimes that come up with the excuses? Reasons why we're too busy or overcommitted to attend the feast? Can we see ourselves as part of the outsider group that can't understand why we would be the invited ones? That Jesus would include us in that radical invitation, and we hear it as if it was the first time given to us. I would wish that we could see ourselves as servants in this story. The servants who simply hear the master who wants his congregation and his pews filled, and he says, I want you to go out and invite people, and if they don't come, I want you to go out and search harder. I want you to go under the bridges. I want you to go into those huts that are in the rural areas with broken windows that maybe where meth was once made, and if people are living there, tell them that we want you to come to our Saviors, because here the gift of Jesus is in waiting for you. And we go with that urgency that says, we won't take no for an answer. We want you to be a part of the community. Friends, the servants didn't go with answers to all the questions. They didn't go with explanations to why a host would be this good. All they did is deliver the invitation itself. Going to the outsiders, friends, is not easy, because it might mean that we go to people that we have been uncomfortable around. The socially excluded, the refugee, the drug addict, the incarcerated, the homeless, those living in poorly maintained homes, migrants, whether they're legal or not, the mentally disadvantaged, and we simply go with an invitation. Jesus wants you at the banquet. Friends, we have a lot of work to do in our church. Not just our Saviour's Lutheran, but the church at large. We look pretty much alike. When we look around as neighbors and friends, we have so much in common. And I'm glad that we have spare seats in these pews, because it's room for people that we have not invited in, that we must invite in, that may not look like us or smell like us or even have a vocabulary like us. But it's our task to be bold enough and to lay aside our Lutheran humility that says, oh, if they want to find church, they'll follow the signs. No, we're going to go with an invitation that says, there's something in waiting for you. Come and join us at our Saviour's Lutheran. Jesus, the host, has something in waiting for you. Friends, we come to the feast just as we are. It doesn't make any difference what you've done or what you've not done or where you've been. In Jesus, we are welcomed, forgiven, claimed, and here at the feast, we celebrate together. And just think, it all begins with a radical invitation.